everybody says it's a game of numbers. Well, it's really a game of relationships, but it is also a game of numbers. You know, an old sales mentor of mine once said when I was in the insurance business, there are only three ways to impact your results, and that's see more people, sell more of the people you see, and retain more of the people you sell.
Welcome to a private conversation with me, Steve Robbins. I'm sitting down with some of the biggest names in Indianapolis real estate. I've enjoyed these conversations immensely, and I hope you will too. A big thank you to Executive GM Ian Soroyan and his whole team for hosting us at Cunningham Restaurant Group's Commission Row and Mel Speakeasy, located in downtown Indianapolis within the Pacer Sports and Entertainment Complex. Check out the show notes to learn more. And now, one of Highgarden Real Estate's finest brokers and leaders, Kyle Gilette. Well, thanks for sitting down, and
You bet.
I guess let's start right at the beginning of your time with Highgarden.
Okay.
So I definitely want to jump back to your history because you have a lot of history in the new home industry, and
Yeah, a little bit.
more than a little bit. But what do you remember about leaving the new home industry? And when you joined Highgarden, it was your first time in general real estate. Is that correct? Or I don't remember.
No,
Okay.
not actually.
Tell me.
I was briefly in general real estate back in 1980.
Oh, 80.
Yeah, some people think 1880, but it actually was 1980. And I started with AHM Graves.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Brad Donaldson was my office manager. So I was right out of real estate school and spent about 6 months there. And I actually wasn't sure real estate was going to be for me. So I was interviewing at the same time. I'd been out of Indiana University. I have a degree in marketing.
Yeah.
And I'd been out of school for about 2 or 3 years and was really trying to figure out a career path. And an insurance company, Progressive Casualty, called me and wanted to interview me. And so that started me off on a 10-year stint in the insurance industry.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
And so that was after you had 6 months then with the Graves.
Yes.
And then transitioned into
the insurance business. And so for 10 years, I was a licensed property casualty and health insurance agent.
Okay.
And so I was 5 years with Progressive Casualty, the big multi-billion-dollar company it is today, property casualty. And then I worked 5 years for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I was in their commercial division. So most of my work was actually central Indiana municipalities. I had a lot of the cities around the state and serviced those accounts and sold those accounts.
So you had 6 months in real estate.
Yep.
You transitioned out of new construction. We'll come back to that, like I said. But
sure.
What do you remember about joining Highgarden back in, it was 2013, the beginning of 2013?
I remember a lot because I was fired actually out of the new construction business. I happened to be vice president of sales and marketing for MI Homes at the time.
Yeah.
And so they were looking to go a different direction. It wasn't for cause or anything of that nature, but they provided a severance package. So I had a little lead time, a little cash flow to get involved in general real estate, and still had held my license all of those years, and really was wanting to have my own business the whole time. I'd been in corporate America for 30 plus years. I worked for 5 Fortune 500 companies through that time frame, and had always had a deep desire to own my own business. And so I almost didn't come to Highgarden because at the time we were branded as Easy Street Realty. And I don't know if you remember these conversations, but you and I and Chris and Brian all knew one another because we did some marketing together in new construction. And you sold a lot of houses for me, both at Centex Homes and MI Homes and
Definitely.
and so forth. So, but it was a perfect transition. I almost signed with Remax.
Yeah.
And a close friend of mine was with Remax, and I was kind of hung up on the branding. And I wasn't sure that Easy Street really tied to some of the client base I was hoping to establish, meaning higher price points and so forth.
Yeah.
And so I was concerned about that. And then you and the partners, Brian and Chris, reassured me that, hey, we'll give you all the support in the world. And you really brand yourself in this business. You know, you're
Right.
kind of the front facing of this. And we're working on some things with our branding anyway.
Right.
And so you were starting to adjust the brand at that point. In fact, I think it came probably a year and a half, 2 years later, as I
Around there.
recall.
Yeah, we had always been Easy Street, and we knew that that was a name for who we were. We had come from a first-time home buyer builder,
Yes.
and Easy Street just kind of had a ring to it as it related to helping first-time home buyers, in our opinion. But as we became a different type of real estate company, and one of the other, you being certainly an impetus with that thought on the branding, but it was already something that was in the back of our head. And then when we opened up our office in Phoenix, gentleman Martin Hernandez, who we opened that office with, he had been with a lot of builders in Indianapolis.
Yes, I knew Martin.
He had come from Sotheby's in Phoenix after having been with Beazer for a number of years out west, and he didn't want the name Easy Street either. And we were like, yeah, this is an issue. We need to change it. So changing to Highgarden's been a huge positive.
Yeah, no question. And it's the best choice I could have ever made.
Well, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Why?
Multitude of reasons. Number one, what you stated about support was spot on. I don't believe I ever would have had the support that I achieved, that I was able to have access to it at Easy Street Highgarden. And just one-on-one assistance, even though I had a tremendous amount of experience in real estate, I had not had that much experience, obviously, in the resale side of it.
Right.
And so Danielle helped tremendously. And,
Danielle Bell.
Yeah, and Evan, her husband.
Yes.
And literally to the point of setting up the vendors I would need to use and why I would need to use them. Really blocking and tackling of how to operate a real estate business. And I don't really believe, and even to this day, that I ever would have had that kind of support other than at Highgarden Real Estate.
Well, it's been reciprocal, because you've provided.
Appreciate that.
I mean, you've been in a lot of roles with us, and VP of Sales Marketing with us. Not just with all the builders. I mean, you've done a lot of training and support and sales craftsmanship with our organization, and it's been amazing.
And I appreciate that opportunity. That's the other thing about having the ability to grow at Highgarden has just been incredible, because you did provide those opportunities, and I really enjoy helping people. And that really is the fabric of our culture.
It is.
It's incredible. And I've said this to you many times. Again, having worked at 5 Fortune 500 companies, both in and outside the industry, our culture is second to none. I have never been in a better corporate culture in my lifetime. And it says a lot about who we hire, who we develop. And you can simply send a text or an email with a question. You have an answer in less than 10 seconds. And that's just been our culture ever since I've been here. And
people are going to think this is incredible. A commercial, Kyle.
You know, I hope it is, because if we can continue to attract like-minded people that we have, our diversity, it's awe-inspiring to me, and it makes me happy to be a member and come in every day.
Well, thank you so much.
You bet.
So,
absolutely.
What did you remember from your 6-month stint at Graves back in 1980 that actually translated in 2013? Anything?
Really?
Because
yeah.
things were changed quite a bit, but there's still some common
Yeah,
core.
we were back in the paper days,
right?
Where we had to look through listing books that were this deep, and you had to manually deliver contracts and everything else. So it was, you know, other than the horse I rode, it was pretty regimentary, to say the least. But Yeah, Brad Donaldson was really a good mentor, and he just recently retired from Tucker. He was an office manager at Tucker for years. A lot of people don't know this, but he started at AHM Graves, and Graves and Tucker at the time, back in the 1980s, were vying for #1 in the market.
Right.
And then Graves sold out to Tucker and became part of Tucker. And so Brad was involved in that transition, but he imparted a lot of real estate knowledge to me in a very brief period of time. He was a great mentor. I can't say enough about Brad.
Awesome.
But a lot of it was just staying out there and making contacts. He was very big on metrics and making certain that you had real estate conversations. And I sold some homes and it worked out fine. It's just this other opportunity presented itself. And my family, meaning my spouse, was more focused on guaranteed income at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And I do believe a lot of people get hung up on paychecks and so forth. And I'm here to say that's not the stability. The stability is in your own efforts and drive. And that's where you really solidify security.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people don't enter our industry that have that concept in their mind. I did as well for a while. And you're better off to, go ahead and get involved.
You talked about real estate conversations, and that's like the big thing that's always in my head, that agents often don't force themselves or have a plan to have enough real estate conversations.
Yes.
Do you see that too? And what do you think? What do you say to an agent that's struggling, that isn't having enough real estate conversations?
I talk to them about the metrics, and everybody says it's a game of numbers. Well, it's really a game of relationships, but it is also a game of numbers. An old sales mentor of mine once said, when I was in the insurance business, there are only 3 ways to impact your results, and that's see more people, sell more of the people you see, and retain more of the people you sell. So the first is just effort and drive. Anybody can do that. It's just see more people, have those conversations, and be fearless about them. And the beauty of Highgarden and our organization is you can be fearless because of the support. I felt very confident with people like Brian Holly behind me, who is the most knowledgeable broker I've ever met in my life. And I think he's got an advantage because he handles all of our markets. But I felt very confident that I had the expertise regardless of the question.
Yeah.
And that's always proved to be the case because I still don't have all the answers. And I've been doing real estate since 1980. So
Nobody does.
Yeah. So and it's changing constantly. And I just love the fact that we're constantly provided with the information we need to succeed. But back when I was in the insurance industry, we used to look at metrics a lot. The insurance industry is based on that. That's really even the nature of underwriting. And so when I was in home building, I developed a system called activity-based management. And so I used to track how many conversations I had, how many of them resulted in an appointment, how many of those appointments ended in a transaction, and how many of those transactions closed. And what it did show me is that you've got to balance all of those entities to be successful at this, or really in any sales scenario. It doesn't have to be just real estate. And so I was fortunate enough to win the President's Award when I was at Centex Homes. At the time, we were the largest builder in the country. We were building 55,000 homes a year. And that award was given once a year to a group of people or a person that had the largest impact on our financial statements. And so I felt very proud of that and very fortunate to win it.
What'd you do to win?
We exported, and I taught all of our divisions activity-based management. And we integrated that system into our sales reports. And so we could begin to see, okay, this person is getting X% of their sales through realtors. but they're not getting their share of conversions on face-to-face interactions with walk-in customers. And so we could adapt their behaviors and adjust our sales training to better impact and maximize our results within a community. And so we exported that to all of our divisions, and it became an integral fabric of our metrics.
So going back a little bit then to how you even got into new home construction. So you've been in the insurance industry for 10 years or so.
Yes.
I think I saw that it was in '89 you joined Dura Builders, is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so how did that end up happening?
That happened through a friend of mine from college, and he, over the years, he's retired now, and we met at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, and his name is Al Lieben, and at the time he was the sales manager for Hansen and Horn. And we had kept in touch over the years, and I was out in California, and Progressive Casualty had established a subsidiary called National Continental Insurance. And I covered 11 Western states and sold fleet truck insurance to long-haul carriers in those states. And it was a new venture for Progressive. They didn't have the underwriting results, the profitability they wanted, so they shut the process down a year later. And so basically I was out of work and looking for something, and he gave me a call and he said, hey, you might want to come back to Indianapolis. First of all, I'd like you to be back, and you know, your family's here and so forth. And he said, you love selling, you've been trained to sell. I was actually trained by Xerox and IBM trainers when I was in the insurance industry. And he said, I think you'd love this and it'd be a perfect fit for you. So I came back and I interviewed 6 or 7 of the top builders. I actually interviewed with Dick Crosser,
Okay.
who was a great man. I
Yes.
almost joined Crossman, but I also met with Paul Schupman at Dura Builders.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to Dura and had a 5-year career there before I went into management in the home building industry.
And so what did you learn at Dura?
A tremendous amount. At Dura, incredible opportunity there in regard to, we were structured so that we were almost active field managers in addition to being salespeople.
Really?
Part of our job was to walk every home, and the mantra was, and you'll hear this in the construction industry a lot of times, the mantra was every house, every room, every day. And we had to walk our houses because we would have one superintendent for 3 or 4, maybe 5 neighborhoods, which is spreading that person very thin unless we could report back. So I learned intimate things about how a home's constructed, how it should be constructed, what to look for during the process, if there's an issue, and what have you. And I have to admit, that served me quite well in building my client base as I came to Highgarden.
Yeah. So Dura went from Dura to Rowland?
No. I
Okay.
actually went to Dura, and I was vice president of sales and marketing for Mansard Development Group.
Okay.
Corporation, actually.
Okay.
And we had several projects, and that was a completely different side of the business. We had Watermark on the north end of the downtown canal.
Okay.
So we had freestanding homes and attached townhomes, and it's still a project that I'm quite proud of on the north end of the canal. You can see it. It's on the east side of the bank, right by the USS Indianapolis Memorial. And we had Hamilton proper, which is an enormous project. It's a Arthur Hills 18-hole golf community that literally is capable of holding a U.S. Open. And we also developed a golf course up in Clarkston, Michigan, which is northwest of Detroit. So I managed those 3 projects for Mansard Development, and I sold, I had salespeople. I had a salesperson downtown and a couple out at Hamilton Property, and I managed those folks, and they sold directly to consumers to purchase home sites, and we would connect them with custom home builders.
Right.
And we would also sell home sites directly to the custom home builders.
Gotcha. So you had kind of transitioned from being in sales mainly to being in management at that point?
Yes.
And what was that transition like?
I really enjoyed it. I love selling, but I also enjoy education and helping people. And I was blessed with having some incredible companies that I'd worked for, and having the foundation of Xerox needs satisfaction, sales training, having the advantage also of IBM Earn the Right, which is an ability to obtain the order without directly asking for it.
Yes.
And then when I worked, I was national sales manager for Rotland Homes out of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I became a licensed analyst of the predictive index system, which was personality recognition. And you may have heard the terminology, that person's an A-type personality. That's
right.
where that's derived from. It was the letters A, B, C, and D, as opposed to at Highgarden we use DISC, and that's D-I-S-C. And for DISC, it's
DISC. What do the DIS and C stand for again? I know what they stand for.
There's a joke in there.
Well, there is a joke in there
from one of the other partners.
That's for sure.
But it's dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness.
Yeah.
And
that's been so well received in our organization, and how to leverage it, and how to just better understand yourself and your clientele, obviously.
Well, when we were at Centex, we also integrated that process with activity-based management. And in the division that I became Vice President of Sales and Marketing, Minneapolis, St. Paul, we tripled sales with the same number of communities, and the market was shrinking by about 20% in that next 12 months after we implemented that process with the same salespeople, and didn't lose a salesperson. So it just worked incredibly well, and I know you're an aficionado of both those processes, and you learned them very well because we did some training for you at one point.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. I mean, it's incredibly effective, and it's not about you in a sales process. It's about the customer. So you have to sell the way the customer wants to own the product.
That's right.
And that's the basis of any of these personality recognition platforms. It's like Myers-Briggs, or if it's DISC or what have you.
Right. And how about Cialdini's book on persuasion? So this has been something that you've also, throughout the years with us, have trained on his different.
The powers of influence. That's from Dr. Robert Cialdini. He's a professor at Arizona State University, and he teaches selling. And he went out into the arena, took a 3-year sabbatical from the university, and went out and studied the top 10% of salespeople in a multitude of industries, both tangible and intangible products. So he was he sold insurance, he sold cars, he sold furniture, he sold retail clothing. And what he found are that the top 10% of salespeople were using 6 basic powers of influence. And they integrated those powers of influence with every conversation they had. And when I went back and looked at the training I'd had through Xerox and IBM and the other personality recognition, I saw that pattern within it, and it became very evident to me that, I've been doing this as well, but I didn't have a label for it. And having a label for it can be very effective, because then we can pass it on and train it. And you combine those 3 elements of how to ask questions, personality recognition, and metrics, and doing your due diligence and following up, you can't be stopped. And the beauty is Highgarden has all these tools.
Yeah. So then you ended up moving from Rotland to Centex?
Yes.
Centex and Beazer and back to Centex, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
And so a lot of different builders along the way.
Yes.
How were they
compare and contrast a little bit the nature of working at different home builders, and
Yes.
you went through the crash.
Yes.
And you saw a lot of different things happen over the course of 15, 20 years in the business.
Absolutely. The builders, having come from the insurance industry, which was a lot of access to a lot of really good learning platforms, as I've mentioned, and moving into home building, it was really a bit of a shock to my system, the lack of sophistication.
Yeah.
Because quite frankly, a lot of the builders were developed from what we would call pickup truck builders. I mean, Pulte Homes, Bill Pulte started with his own pickup and was building individual homes. Paul Schupman, that I work for and still have tremendous respect for, he did the same way. He was pouring concrete with his dad and then ended up starting, and he'd build a custom home, and he and Shelley, his spouse, would live in it. And then as soon as they got it sold, they'd build another one and move into it. And that's how Paul got his start. So, but they didn't have didn't need the systems that ultimately they had to have today to build 60 to 80,000 homes a year. And so that's why I believe that gave me a leg up in sales training and sales management, because I brought a new awakening, so to speak, to the builders I was with. And that presented opportunities.
What do you think agents, we've had a lot of conversations about agents selling or not selling new construction.
Mm-hmm.
And why do you think some agents are kind of shy to do it, and what are they missing?
Exposure more than anything else. There's no mystery to selling new construction. It's incredibly easy, and it's the most profitable thing an agent can do. And I had that knowledge coming from that side of the business, because once you have the introduction, and if you do your own research and have some knowledge about construction and how the process flows, the builder pretty much manages that process going forward. Now, a good broker is going to be there for all the meetings, meaning the paperwork, actually choosing the home, if that's happening. That's not happening as much as it used to, because most of the builders are building what we call spec homes, built on speculation. They'll have a buyer, and that's easier for the builder. It's more efficient. But if you are building for from paper, you've got to be there at that meeting. You're there at the pre-drywall orientation. You're there at the pre-home settlement orientation, and you're there for the closing. But from a time efficiency standpoint, from a regular buyer process or a seller process, the hourly commitment is infinitely less. And that's why at Highgarden, we often train people that you really need to look at this industry as what's your compensation per hour.
Right.
Because you only have so many hours in the day. So the most lucrative thing someone can do is sell new construction. It's just an exposure issue. That's why I believe it's imperative for people good brokers or brokers that want to grow their business, they've got to be intimately familiar with that process, and it's not that difficult. Don't be afraid of it. And at Highgarden, you've got a bunch of people that are intimately familiar with, because our ownership team, you, Chris, and Brian, came from the industry. I came from the industry. Several of our sales leaders have come from that side of the business. And it's been a huge growth pattern for our organization since we became a business back in 2000.
2000.
Yeah, 2000. So I just think they really just need to be acclimated to it. And the builders also, traditional market share for decades was 12 to 14% of closings. In Indianapolis last year, it was over 31% in new construction. So a big portion of your client base is going to be purchasing new construction. Why? Because of the interest rate buy downs.
Right.
And the average person in that $300,000 to $500,000 range has an additional $50,000 to $60,000 in ownership power with that buy down mortgage.
And there's so many agents that have not had that exposure and are not putting themselves in a position to learn about new construction, and they're missing out on that third
Yes.
of business that's happening. When
Yeah.
it's 10 or 12%, it's one thing. When it's a third and you're not paying attention or involved, then there's an issue.
There's no question. And it's as simple as, it's a very simple process to control it. The builders are very rigid at this point about thresholding the client.
Right.
Meaning you're there for the first visit, and you should be there for the first visit. But there are other ways to protect yourself. And as soon as you know that new construction could be a viable opportunity for a client, you've got to get them registered with that builder. And still, a lot of the builders will allow phone registration.
Right.
So you can simply go to New Home Source and see what builders are in that area, the school system typically, and find out what builders will work, call the model, and register your client up front so that you're protected if they, by chance, walk into the model without you. We all know that can happen.
Mission Row offers an unforgettable dining experience with high-quality steaks, a raw bar, and exquisite seafood curated by an expert culinary team. The menu, designed to delight every palate, features seasonal ingredients paired with an extensive wine and spirit selection. Open weekdays from 4 p.m. and for brunch at 10 a.m. on weekends. Continue the evening at Mel's Speakeasy below. After dining, enjoy an after-dinner drink with a wide selection of wines, cocktails, and spirits. Open daily from 5 p.m., Mel's is perfect for relaxing and unwinding. Commission Row and Mel's Speakeasy. An unforgettable dining experience awaits.
What do you think the builders could do differently, perhaps, to help educate? Have you thought about, I'm sure, in your position, you've thought about gaining realtor business, I'm sure, along the way, every step of the way. Although some builders, and maybe I'll ask you to comment on this, are much less realtor friendly than others.
Yes.
Why is that?
It totally depends on market conditions.
Yes.
You know, and we all understand that, you know, if they don't really need walk-in business, realtor business, they're not going to be that favorable about it. We've seen that. They'll reduce commissions. They'll make it more difficult sometimes, not really purposefully sometimes,
Yeah.
but it might be more difficult to work with that builder. And some of that's even on their websites. They're more difficult to navigate unless the client registers and
Right.
that kind of a thing. So they're trying to capture the client before we get them.
Yes.
And that's obvious. And it's just business. Don't take that as adversarial because then people get an attitude, well, I don't want to work with them because, you know, they cut me out of a transaction or whatever. I find that very infrequent. I find it's mostly on the broker. If they do their due diligence, stay with their customer, make sure they understand that they need to be with them when they go out to look at new construction. That's
Right.
critical.
Okay.
But yes, it's totally based on market conditions. And we've seen that dramatic shift in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
It also depends about time of year and whether or not that builder is hitting their numbers, especially publicly traded builders. You have an advantage as a broker to go in if they're not hitting their monthly number, to go in and get a better transaction. They'll negotiate.
Right.
And if it's quarter end, even more negotiating power if they haven't hit their projections to Wall Street. And at their fiscal year end, enormous power.
Yeah.
And
right.
so you see those things happen, and that gives you more leverage to do it. But I was even going to offer to our company to get back and do some special sessions on new construction again, because
Great.
you've got to have that in your portfolio when you're out with a client. You better have it.
Yeah, I mean, with it being a third of the business, and I don't really see that changing this year. It doesn't. I mean, it's not like rates are dropping below 6% anytime soon. It doesn't
Yes.
look like anyway. And so the builders continue to have that advantage with a 3.99 or a 4.99
Yes.
rate.
And they're permanent buy downs.
Right.
Most of them. Some
Right.
are temporary. But
Yeah.
permanent buy downs, that it's just an enormous impact. And that's why their market share has almost tripled nationally, not just in Indianapolis,
Yeah.
because of working the financing.
Right. So when you first started with Highgarden, you were very much still focusing on new construction
Yes.
and had so many relationships with so many different people, with different builders. And over time, your business grew way outside of new construction. And what was that process like for you, getting away from new homes and into more resale?
Yes. That was really working my sphere.
Okay.
And, I'm glad you brought this topic up, because it's interesting as I've gone through this process. There are two things that actually shocked me coming from the builder side. One is I really didn't see or have access to how quickly and how dramatically markets shift. And what we talk about today and could be valid in the marketplace today may be completely different this weekend. It can happen that quickly. And so that was one shock. The other shock was how different it was to market to the general public and to your sphere versus to really an intermediary. So the foundation of my business has dramatically shifted. And who's really helped me see those shifts is Jeff Kern.
Yes.
One of our other sales leaders. And I actually use Jeff really as a market barometer, because he has a unique vision, better than really anybody I know in the business, of seeing 3 to 6 months out and what's going to happen and why. He's got a good macro view of financing and home building and of general real estate. And so I go to him many times and say, hey, something's happened here. I'm not getting the leads or the transactions from this sales source. What's going on? And he invariably has the answer for me.
Okay.
But that also has been a shock.
Awesome.
So I'd say the first 2 years I was in the industry, the first year was totally Highgarden leads.
Right.
Because believe it or not, in spite of my background and all the expertise and the knowledge of the business and even how a home's constructed, my sphere didn't think that I had the wherewithal to do resale real estate. So it took me probably 18 to 24 months to get them to believe in me.
Yeah.
So thank the Lord for Highgarden Real Estate leads. And I ended up doing quite well my first full calendar year.
You did.
And the entire source of my business was Highgarden Real Estate leads. After that, it shifted, as you mentioned, to new construction. And then that lead source believed that I knew what I was doing and could help them with their clients.
Right.
And then the builders kind of shifted from that and made it more difficult to do business with them. So then I shifted on exploiting my sphere and really remarketing to our sphere. And what has dramatically helped me in that, and I really don't care if this is a commercial because I'm telling you fact, is our follow-up system, our CRM tool.
Right.
And when we come out monthly, I stay in touch with all my clients now, and it's automated. I do more than that, but the automation of it is just incredible. They get the market statistics once a month. They also get an automated valuation on their home, and also they get the neighborhood activity.
Right.
So it's just incredible, and that really assisted me to do more with my sphere. And a tremendous amount of my business now is my sphere.
We do have an amazing proprietary system that.
Oh, it's incredible.
With Chris kind of focusing on the technology, Alex Shaner, who is our director of IT. I've known Brian Hawley since kindergarten, but I've also known Alex Shaner since kindergarten.
Oh, wow.
We're so lucky to have Alex.
Yes.
Because that tool has been amazing for us, and so many people have told me, even people that have left Highgarden over the years have said, I really miss the IMS, which is the name of our tool. But
and there's no question.
It is powerful. A lot of people
Very
don't
powerful.
leverage it as well as it could be, and that's frustrating because it's right there for you.
It is. That's another due diligence effort there that personally you obviously can control. Getting
Right.
your sphere into that system is essential,
Yes.
and your prospects as well. Every bit as important, if not more so.
Well, last year was an interesting year in real estate
It
with the
was.
lawsuit settlement, and interest rates have not come down the way a lot of people have hoped. What, if anything, have you experienced with, for example, with the changes with having to have a buyer agency agreement
Yes.
and, some of the other last 12, 24 months in real estate? How's it affected you?
It has been challenging, to say the least. Not the commission issue, not challenging at all.
Right.
I'm here to make a living like anybody else, and I'm not embarrassed by that fact at all, and no one should be. The buyer agency agreement, same thing. I mean, I've found it to be more successful to have that initial meeting
Right.
and bond and work it the way you can work it. If you've got enough of a bond and you've gained enough trust to sign an agreement for 6 months, wonderful. But there may be occasions, and you need to be accepting of this, that it might be for that showing only. That's not the objective, obviously, but it can happen that way. But I've also had those end up converting and
Yeah.
working with me.
Right.
I believe the industry and the pundits really misinformed the consumer with this interest rate thing, because historical average is 7 3/8. We're still below the historical average. And just like in 1982, when rates were over 18%, rates at 2.5% were just the same type of anomaly in the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody said, well, interest rates are too high. Interest rates are too high. They're not too high. They're in the normal range. And it's taken a long time for people to understand that. The largest hurdle I've had with my sphere has been that so many people are reluctant, and rightfully so, to give up mortgages 2.5 to 4%. They're
Yep.
very reluctant to do that.
Yes.
So has that negatively impacted my business? Sure, it has. Absolutely.
The whole industry.
Yes. But on the other side of the coin, if you're niched properly, like some of our brokers are, we have some brokers at Highgarden that have completely defied those odds through hard work and niches.
Mm-hmm.
And niches can be anything. They may not even have anything to do with actually selling real property. It could be a marketing niche, or it could be a geographic area.
Yes.
And so some of our really well niched people have defied the odds. I'm not one of those this year. I wish I were, but I still had a reasonable year given all things considered. And I'll be back up again.
Oh, yeah.
So it just happens that way. But we really have to send the message to people that we're in a normal interest rate environment. Interest rates are not high. And if you want a lower interest rate, you want that additional owning power, when you're negotiating an agreement with a seller, see if they won't contribute to lowering the interest, just like the builders are, who have gobbled up triple the normal market share they've had in the past.
Exactly. Speaking of sellers, I was thinking about the idea that you worked for home builders for years, and then you worked in the beginning still kind of focusing on new construction. What was it like for you to start working with sellers and handling listings? That has to be a whole nother ball of wax.
It was. I found it to be a pretty easy transition because the builder's the seller.
True.
So there's ownership there, and I knew about listing property very well, because an interesting part of my career was I listed property. At times I was licensed in up to 5 states. So I was handling all of our listings.
Okay.
I had couple of assistants, but personally I was overseeing the listing of all that property for my entire career. And as a result of that, I knew a lot about how to list property and what needed to be involved, even with new construction, through the construction phases.
Yeah.
So that helped me quite a bit. It really did. And how to present a home, what highlights to make, because I had an intimate knowledge of what people, in terms of features they desired from home building. What were they willing to pay for? You know, was it crown molding? Was it chair rail, as we go back to?
Right.
Was it hard surface countertops, and at what price point? And that gave me provided me a lot of advantage. And I've been very successful on the listing side. In fact, really, I've only in the last couple of years had a true balance of buyers versus sellers.
Okay.
It's been more on the listing side.
How do you think the skill sets differ to be successful with buyers versus sellers?
I believe you have to have a broader knowledge of the industry, market trends. A lot of times when you're listing property, you're dealing with someone that's already had the ownership experience. So they've gone through the process. They're more aware of what the dynamics are. And in some ways, you know, the internet's been hugely helpful to our industry. We have the highest, last year was the highest participation percentage, broker involved share of the marketplace in the history of real estate. So the internet's helped us tremendously. And I remember when we first started using the internet, people were terrified.
Yeah.
But it made our jobs much easier, much more efficient. And we can provide services better. So I believe that that has been somewhat of a double-edged sword, because we get people that believe they are experts. And I've always said I never want to be an expert, because by definition it means you've learned it all. I hope I've never learned it all. I know I haven't. And so it's interesting, but you better have a better knowledge base and a broader knowledge base to successfully work with listing property.
Okay. And some of the other phases of the transaction that I haven't really gotten to a lot here, but I'd like to touch on with you, because you may not call yourself an expert, but I'm going to call you an expert because you're damn close to one as I know. The inspection process. It's a place where a lot of agents have a lot of anxiety about things falling apart.
Yes.
And it seems like there's always so much gray when everyone's looking for black and white.
Yes.
How do you manage your inspection process with your transactions?
I believe I do a pretty darn good job. And that goes back to the fact that I understand construction to an intimate level.
Yes.
So I have a huge advantage. And that's why a lot of our brokers come to me to help them with inspection responses. And I'm glad to do it. But I believe that it's really more a sense of fair play. Where it gets difficult is if you have a client or another client that they're not as clear on what fair play is. And let's face it, even if it isn't a defect, if it's a deficiency, as I would like to say, should it be corrected by the person that is in the property? Probably so. So I lean more toward, first of all, I like inspections. I believe they're an intimately necessary part of the process to protect the consumer and the homeowner.
Yeah.
And sometimes we find out things like mold contamination, lack of air quality that the homeowner needs to know anyway. But it's fairly clear now in our paperwork. Our documents are getting better and better every year, in my opinion. They're easier to use, they're easier to understand, and they're eliminating more of the gray area. So a defect, as defined in the purchase agreement, is anything that can adversely affect the health and safety of the occupant of the home, and also that would negatively impact the long-term value of the property. So anything that leaks needs to be corrected. Anything that is an environmental contaminant needs to be corrected. The gray area comes into things like windows. That's a big one. People get all upset about failed window seals. Well, it's a cosmetic issue. It's not a defect, because it's not devaluing the home and it's not a safety issue. But somebody could say, well, if I don't see the burglar coming up to the house, that's a safety issue. Well, that's where the gray area comes in. And
when you talk about fair play, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, let's have a moral compass through the inspection process. Let's do what's appropriate. deferred maintenance is deferred maintenance. And that's a reality. And sometimes people say, well, I'd never had to pay this for. Well, that's because you didn't pay it before. And let's go forward. And it's on both sides, believe me. But for the most part, I look back, and I think I've shared this number with you. I would say only 1% of the time do I have a truly difficult individual on the other side of the transaction. And that includes the consumers and the brokers.
Right.
I've run into a lack of experience very often, but that's where you reach out and you help. We're all in this together, and we're in this to take care of the customer. That's the reality.
Well, talk a little bit about relationships with other brokers and how important that is.
Hugely important. It's been a fabric of some of my business every year, in that my son and I are also members. My son works with me. I love that. That's been a blessing.
Corey.
And yeah, Corey. And he has proven to be a phenomenal broker. He has expertise in some areas beyond me. And he really enjoys it. And he does a lot of the back end work. I do a lot of the selling, but he also is doing more of the selling at this point. But working with other brokers has been a good thing. There's a lack of knowledge because statistically, I saw an article through the National Association of Realtors last week where in 2024, 71% of licensees didn't do a single transaction. That's a large number. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean they're unintelligent. It just means they haven't had the exposure of enough transactions to really understand the underpinnings of how to get to the closing table and everyone be satisfied. And so I try to help them. But my point on working with them and how it can benefit the broker themselves is that if you have good relationships, I would say 2 or 3 times a year, because Corey and I are also members of the Indiana Regional Multiple Listing Service, which goes from really Fort Wayne all the way to Evansville. And we also are a member of MyBOR, and that gives us a broad geographic area. We've sold lake homes in northern Indiana, and we sell frequently several homes in Bloomington. And that has given us the opportunity where other brokers are aware of that. And they'll say, Kyle, I don't go to even the south side of Indianapolis sometimes.
Right.
And they'll say, will you take this lead for 25%? Well, absolutely, I'll do that. So 2 or 3 times a year, we get a significant piece of business and get to meet a wonderful new client simply by good broker relationships.
Yeah. Where do you think agents are failing in terms of making those relationships? Or how? Go ahead.
I do believe some of the more seasoned brokers have a tendency to be a bit dictatorial or confrontational in a transaction when they're dealing with someone that's not as experienced. They get frustrated and they start to show that frustration. That's a problem. On the other side of the coin, I think some of the newer people are afraid to ask for help.
Right.
And I try to do it as delicately as possible, but there are often times I'll send back an email with a list of the items that need to be corrected and ask, would you like to send another purchase agreement, or would you like us just to counter these elements? And that has really helped Corey and I a lot to have a really smooth transaction with someone that just doesn't have the experience.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah.
It would be nice if all the other experienced agents were.
It would.
As helpful.
Yes, it certainly would. And that's one of the things to get this in here about our culture that I love. You and Chris and Brian, you don't tolerate egos. We don't have egos at Highgarden Real Estate. We just don't. And I've seen people part from us because of that.
Right.
Because they just don't fit our culture.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I love about our organization, and why a new broker, gosh, if you just got your license, come to Highgarden Real Estate. Do yourself and your career a favor to come to us.
Yeah.
because you're going to be nurtured, not just helped, nurtured.
And talk a little bit about what it takes, in your opinion, for a new agent to be successful. That they need nurture.
Totally. And they absolutely have to have a support fabric of expertise. Let's face it, they're not going to have the expertise. I don't know it all, and I seek help all the time. And I don't know how many times I go to Brian in a month, probably 4 times, once a week at least, in spite of the years I've spent in this. And if someone comes into the business, that it would be essential they choose a brokerage where they truly have one-on-one individual mentorship through transactions until they have a good foundation. And in my opinion, for most new brokers, that's going to be a 2-year process.
Yeah.
It really is, till they're truly competent without help. The biggest hurdle I see most new brokers, the challenge for them is to understand that concept and be fearless about their prospecting and their real estate conversations. That's the largest hurdle that I've seen over the years I've helped people at Highgarden. They just are so reluctant to have that initial conversation because they don't have the confidence in their knowledge base. And that's why we'll even go out with them. We'll go out on that visit, and we don't ask for a share of the commission. We just go with them, and we'll help them through those initial transactions, be it a listing or a showing property or what have you.
I always say it takes about 6 to 12 months for an agent to kind of get comfortable,
Yes.
and maybe 12 to 24 months for an agent to maybe be confident.
Yes.
I mean, it's a process.
Yes.
There's a multi-skilled facets here of
It
learning
is.
and understanding to gain that wisdom.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, sometimes that hurdle is so difficult for some people to overcome that I have to know it all before I go out there and have conversations. Well, then you're not going to make it in our industry,
Yeah.
because the conversations come first. The knowledge will be there with your support.
Also, haven't spoken too much about the negotiation process in a transaction, but I'd like to with you.
Sure.
It's a place where it makes a big difference in your value to a client, but it's a place that I don't hear a lot of agents talk too much about.
Yes.
How do you approach negotiations, and what do you think agents could do better in that regard?
It's a lot of different things. Negotiation has so many variables. Where someone was raised, meaning there can be ethnic, there can be cultural differences that are foundational to the negotiation process. And if you don't go through those steps, you're not going to have transactions with people that feel that way. You're just not. So that's incredibly limiting in today's practice of real estate, because a lot of my clientele are expats from other countries and so forth. And if you don't understand the cultural necessities of the negotiation process, because it varies all over the world, you're not going to do well with that happening. The other process, it's very different with a home builder as it is with a resale property. Home builders are non-emotional. They don't care. They're not going to get upset by a low offer or what have you. A lot of brokers just don't understand that they can negotiate on, especially on spec homes,
Yes.
inventory. The older the inventory, the more you can negotiate. And you can get things like, if they're not including the refrigerator or a washer and dryer, or they're not including a set of blinds for the household, or shutters, or if the yard isn't fully sodded, you can get full sod. Things that don't require the builder to alter their construction schedule, and also having that understanding of, basically, is the builder privately held or are they publicly held? If they're publicly held, they have a quarterly call to Wall Street about how many units. Units are more important than profitability. Knowing that, hey, let's go back to them at the end of the month, or let's go back to them because we're not on a clock here at the end of this quarter, and perhaps we can get a better deal. But also be fearless in offering something low that might work,
Right.
that still could come in. That's where there's incredible monetary value in negotiation, both on price and also on inspection and also on financing. Those three pillars can be tens of thousands of dollars to a client. And an astute broker needs to be able to monetize that value. It makes a 3% commission, small change, if you will, by really understanding negotiation, how to do it, and also understanding financing and how to get the right financing for your clients and through the inspection process as well. And having those contacts with contractors. That's another
Right.
thing that I like about Highgarden. We share all of our contractors.
Yes.
A lot of brokerages don't like to do that, but we do. And so we have a comprehensive list of competitive bid opportunities where we can really save a client a lot of money.
Right. What about negotiations on resale properties where you're dealing with another agent?
I try to talk to the agent every time. To me, it's essential to develop a rapport with the other parties involved. And that doesn't mean just the agent. That means understanding who their client is from a perspective of relationships. Who are their advisors? You know, if they're young, do mom and dad need to be brought in, or both sets of grandparents need to be brought in, or parents? Conversely, with older clientele, sometimes the kids have to be involved in the negotiation. I like to understand through that broker the motivation, if I can get it from the seller. They don't have to share the information, but there's no law against asking. Who are the parties involved? Who's advising your client? And what do you think about what's most important to them in the offer? And I find that really helps. Sometimes I get information, sometimes I don't. And that's okay. That doesn't matter. But the more you know about the situation, I believe the smoother the transaction and the negotiation becomes.
How do you go about negotiating in a delicate situation where you're dealing with a resale agent that doesn't really understand the value of their own property?
Yes. I will share comps. There are times I'll just come back and say, hey, would you mind sharing the comps you're basing your pricing on? I was fortunate enough to go through a detailed appraisal class before, so I understand appraisal pretty well. And that's a whole nother topic that I would totally revamp how we appraise property. But what we're dealt, the cards we're dealt today, I would say that understanding that aspect of appraisal and valuation of property really does help my negotiations. I might share the comps that I've established and share the knowledge I have about appraisal and financing. And, you know, we may agree on a price that's above the appraised amount, often do, especially in limited inventory markets like we're seeing.
Right.
But I believe that gives you quite a bit of assistance. And that's, again, a lot of our brokers come to me for comp assistance. One of our staff today, after this meeting, I'm going to be helping Tia Stevens
Yes.
comp a property as soon as we break.
Okay. She told me that.
Yeah.
She's excited to have her first listing in a minute.
Yeah, I'm excited for her. Yeah.
Well, you've been doing so many different roles in real estate and different types of organizations. What are you most proud of?
I would say helping people is, that sounds shallow and to some people and whatever, but I do deeply mean that. I get a great satisfaction of helping someone.
I can vouch for the sincerity.
Yeah.
I know you're genuine.
But I do. I get a great satisfaction of doing the best job I possibly can for that person or people, if you will, to get what they want in a forthright fashion, and that everybody wins. And that's why I still like to do, I also renovate and flip houses.
Yeah.
And could I make more money selling a home? You bet I can. But do I enjoy being involved in the construction again? I do. But the last one I sold was to a couple that had come here from Guadalajara, Mexico a year ago. And their 2 children. It was a 3-1 ranch that pretty much gutted the property, all new HVAC, new roof, new pretty much everything. And they got a wonderful home, and it's the first time those 2 kids have had their own bedrooms. And
Wow.
there's almost nothing more satisfying than that. And I will do a quick commercial here. I do have a property at 1612 East Raymond Street, and it's just about finished, and it's a wonderful 2-1 ranch for $149,900.
Okay.
And somebody's going to get a wonderful home. We even replaced the subfloor in that property because structurally it just wasn't right.
Okay.
So, but all new everything, same thing. And that's something that I'm passionate about. And I've really thought about getting more involved with local government about this, in terms of there can be affordable housing in major metropolitan areas or almost anywhere if we will revise the appraisal process for certain zones that need to be redeveloped. There are a lot of private flippers like me that take pride in what they do and that will come into an area, but they're afraid to because of appraisal. And so if we could create residential enterprise zones like we do for commercial, we'll give tax abatements for commercial building and warehousing and retail and what have you to whoever. We ought to be doing that for renovations, because we have thousands in Marion County of properties that could and would be brought to marketable condition and make wonderful affordable housing for people, so that in inner city we wouldn't be just all gentrifying everything.
Right.
And I'm not against gentrification in the format of, yes, we do need some new construction intermingled, but that's something that would really help this country right now when we have last figure I saw, 1.7 million homeless youths. That's not the total homeless population. That's a massive amount of people without a roof over their heads.
Wow. What do you want the next year or 2 or 3 to look like for you in real estate?
Well, I'm competitive.
You are.
I had some health issues this past year, and I'm hoping they're behind me, but that impacted my volume to the point where I didn't enjoy that. So I am definitely on a path to have a much better year this year. And that's through just getting back to blocking and tackling in real estate, reaching out more to my sphere, being more creative in the outreach, and also taking leads. I would say this, I probably in the last 12 years, I'm up to almost 700 past clients. And last year, 45% of our business was from past clients, repeat purchase. I'm disappointed in our referral base. It was 15% last year. I'd like to double that.
Okay.
And our intent, Corey and my intent, is to do that this year. And we have some definitive plans on how to accomplish that and grow that part of our business better. We're double the national average on repeat clients, and that's because we do a lot of extra things. We go out, we'll clean up yards, we'll paint houses, we'll replace all the fixtures, both door handles, hinges, lights, whatever. And
you go above and beyond.
we do, and but that's how you get word of mouth advertising. They can't help but talk about you.
Right.
My broker actually came in and repaired my toilet. I mean, we've done that at no charge. Just, we do ask that they buy the material.
Right.
But that served us really well. And I believe that's a key component of why we've grown our business so much in repeat buyers.
700 past clients is a lot. And I think I'm glad you brought it up, because I think that's a place where so many agents don't have a plan. And What do you think they could be doing differently that most of them aren't?
Looking at the metrics. You've got to track your metrics. That activity-based management. I know exactly where my business is coming from at all times. And with Jeff Kern's help, he gives me a 60 to a 90-day look at where he believes the market's going to go. That's been invaluable. And anybody that's not using Jeff Kern for that is missing out.
Right.
I will say that. But that's been key.
Well, Kyle, thank you for sitting down
You
and having
bet.
a conversation
Enjoyed
with
it
me.
immensely.
Me
and,
too.
And,
You're a wealth of knowledge here. I'm starting to do, like, on the week in between releasing the new episode, short little 5 or 6 minute segments of the guest talking about something. And I was sitting here thinking I can cut the entire thing up into about 12 different little shorts.
I hope it helps somebody. I do.
Oh, it's going to help a lot of people.